What's happening, guys? Kenny here again, and today I've got another on my mind video, and what I'll be talking about today is sufficient break-in time on your production folders and stuff like that, or even mid-text and stuff like that. There is a break-in time with knives, and I don't think a lot of guys understand, or they think that every knife's going to come in perfect fit and finish and all that stuff. And you know, in a perfect world, that would be the case. We would, you know, like every Spyderco that comes out would be perfectly centered, and you know, there would be, there would be no issues with lock stick or anything like that. But when we're talking about production knives or even mid-text and stuff like that, that you're not actually making knives, you're not making parts specifically for that knife, or there's not the attention to detail that's able to be done in a custom knife where they're actually, you know, like sanding the lock faces individually and making sure everything works just perfectly. In a production knife world, they have to make all the parts and then just kind of slap them together and hope that everything lines up perfectly. That's why it's so important to have really good tolerances and stuff like that in the designing of the knife, because once you get into the production, it's hard to like go back, you know what I mean? And you could really go backwards as far as like profit margin if you're having to go back and fix each knife. Now you're spending extra time on each knife. That all adds up into essentially loss. So that's where I just wanted to talk about this and let you guys know that, yeah, sometimes you're going to get a knife that just has perfect fit and finish right off the bat. You know, I've gotten, you know, in the I think I've gotten 5 pair of 3s and a Spyderco pair of 3s. And out of all of them, I think maybe 3 of them came with like perfect like drop shut action, you know, no lock stick. Or some of them would have a little bit of lock stick but drop shut action. But I think I did have like 2 or 3 that just were really sticky off the bat, had lock stick plus just a really stiff action, and eventually they worked in and they were much better. Or I took them apart and polished the washers, put it back together, and they drop shut just fine. There are cases where there's nothing you can do. You know, you guys probably hear Steve talk about it sometimes, or he's had exclusives that just were, no matter what he did, he could tighten the pivot fully and there was still play in the blade and stuff like that. That does happen, guys, and in all honesty, I think that Spyderco should be replacing that knife. I have heard issues with that, so I'm not going to speak about anybody. I don't want to talk about anything that's hearsay or what someone else said. I'll let them talk to you guys about it. But as far as my experience, I haven't had too many Spydercos that couldn't be adjusted to fix it. I really haven't had any, except for maybe my Crewwear PM2. It's never going to be a drop shut type of knife, unless eventually it breaks in and does. I still haven't found, I can't fidget with it enough to get it to be no play and free swinging when I disengage the compression lock. But that's kind of a unique one. Everything else I've been able to at least adjust to what I want. Just like that with the Benchmades. Most of the Benchmades I've gotten, I've been able to adjust to get where I need it, except for centering, guys. That sometimes you just can't fix centering. But as far as like getting the action you want, I've had a few Benchmades, like my KnifeWorks exclusive, what is that, the 940? Yeah, the 940 16-1601 or whatever it is. That knife just will never be a free swinging access lock. At least with it being a perfect lockup. If it's free swinging, it's gonna have some play in the blade. So sometimes you have to make that option, like free swinging or, you know, movement. So yeah, that's just I wanted to kind of get into that. And actually the knife that brought it up originally was this knife. Because when I was at Ferrum Forge picking this knife out, I kind of got to witness Elliot pulling brand new knives. Elliot from Ferrum Forge, guys. I got to witness him bringing knives out of the box from and then getting them ready. And I got to witness the actual break-in period, seeing what it was like coming out of the box from And I think that's how some knives go straight from the manufacturer to the distributor. And that's not very good, guys. The way that Ferrum Forge has the knife sent to them, they go through each knife and then send it to the distributor. That's the ideal way to go about it, because you can catch what we didn't. Or maybe something that they think, you know, what the manufacturer thinks is acceptable, but the designer does not. So that's the importance of that, and I think that's a really nice touch from companies to get the production knife to their factory or to their shop, and then let them overlook the knife and make sure all the fit and finish and well, just making sure everything's to their spec. So really important, guys, and this is what brought it up. This is what kind of gave me the idea, like, man, I need to do a break-in period type of video. And then this knife solidified that for me. This SNG from Strider, I bought this secondhand, guys. I bought this from a guy. Seems like a legit guy. Gets a lot of Striders. I'm almost positive this isn't a clone or anything like that. I know there's a lot of Strider clones out there. This one in particular, if this is a clone, guys, I am bewildered. I'm just blown away by how well they did this clone, if this is a clone. But I'm pretty sure it's not. It's really beautiful, guys. I'm super impressed with this knife as far as the fit. I mean, it's really tight tolerances and everything. The grind is beautiful. The blade is beautiful. Really nice, super beefy. I'm not going to do a first impressions on this, so this is kind of like a little bit of a first impression. I really am impressed with this knife, and I really love it. And you guys can see this is phosphor bronze washers. And if you guys see, look at this action. Yeah, really nice. Now, when I got this knife, the owner of it, wasn't even the original. There was an owner before him, so you guys know there's probably something wrong with this knife. The detent is really weak. The guy who sold this to me told me it was totally, I knew what I was getting. You guys will see, yeah, it's really weak. Not something I'm super, obviously I knew what I was getting, and I didn't really care. Another thing about Strider is they're known to have a really good warranty, so if I just send this knife with 25 bucks to their shop, it should come back to me working perfectly. Although I'm not really worried about the detent right now. It is something I might eventually fix or send to them to have fixed. Or when I take it apart and clean it and put it back together, it might fix itself. I don't know. Highly unlikely that it's going to fix itself that much. It's really weak. Usually it goes the opposite way. If it's really stiff, it'll start to loosen up. But this is like super weak. I don't think it's going to get any better just by cleaning it. But the other thing I noticed right away, this thing has really early lockup. Striders tend to have like an, oops, sorry, sorry guys. Striders tend to have a really early lockup, at least at the beginning, and then they slowly work their way into like 40%, 50%. It's usually where Striders, I think, land in the end. But this one had a really early lockup, and as I'd squeeze it, let's see if I can get it to do it right now. If I just don't let it lock in, you guys can probably hear that. So I noticed it when I went to cut something. I squeezed in cutting, and I felt it kind of like move a little bit. So there's a little bit of slip there. And then when I went to disengage, you'll hear a little bit of lock stick. It was worse at first. When I would squeeze it, I'd get a lot more movement. Like right now, it's getting barely any movement. Before, it was getting a lot more, and a lot more lock stick. So this is something I noticed right away. And my first intention, my first impression, wasn't to go blow the guy up that I bought this from. It was to go, well, let me flip this thing 100 times and see if it still does it. And that's what I'm talking about. You need to flip the knife a bunch, give it some hard flips, let it see what happens, and you guys will see now that when I do, even if I just roll it out, it barely moved at all. Nothing. So that's what I'm saying. Like you gotta give the knife time, because when they do these knives, like I said, they don't make a blade specifically for this handle. So just whatever blade gets matched up with that, whatever handle, hopefully they all line up all good. Obviously, QC is very important. This thing might have been working perfectly when they first, you know, put it together. It might have been working perfectly, and then as time went on, as this titanium lock face started to wear, it started to wants to shift over. It wants to slip a little bit. It wants to stick a little bit. I can still get stick. Here we go. You hear that stick there, guys? That's about as bad as I've gotten since this video started. There you go, a little bit of stick. So the stick is not bad. It's just a slight stick. And actually, guys, I don't mind lock stick unless it's like really bad where you can almost hurt yourself trying to disengage the lock. But a little bit of lock stick, in my opinion, is just a safety measure, guys. When it's time to disengage the lock, it disengages. It's just a little bit more sturdy. It's not going to slip on me, that's for sure. It's not going to slip that way. So if it engages further as I'm using the knife, because it does have external stop pins, so as those push into the handle and start to wear in and everything and start to seat better, you guys can see this does have, I'm going to flip the camera around here in a second. This does have a radius where the stop pin hits, and it's got a nice, even, very nice, even, you know, contact point. So this is like super, super sturdy in lockup. And when I take it apart and put it back together, I'm sure it's even going to be more so. So that's the thing is as that wears in and starts to, like, everything starts to wear together, of course you might get lock stick, and then eventually it should go away. Everything starts to wear together, and it all starts to, see? I'm not getting any slip now. Just in this video, I'm starting to, like, it's wearing in even more. So this is why I wanted to do this video, because this knife really portrayed what I was talking about with the Ferrum Forge. And I can't really do it with the Ferrum Forge. Sorry for the sudden stop there, but I got a call and I had to take it. So I figured I'd just flip the camera around and start talking about these other knives on the table. So what I was going to say was this knife here, when I handled the knives that had not been broken in, this knife had been out of the box already. They had already oiled it. He had already flipped it a bunch. He tightened the pivot, you know, did everything that he needed to do to get this knife ready. And then they went ahead and flipped it a bunch and were playing with it. So it had already broken in solidly. And the action was much smoother than the other ones that were coming out of the box. Because what also happens is the ceramic detent starts to make a path on your on the tang of the blade, and it gets smoother and smoother as the knife breaks in. So that was another thing that I was like, oh man, because as I was looking at the other versions of the knife, he's like, you know, yeah, it's gonna get smoother. It should be just as smooth as that knife. And I did notice that as I flipped the knife and continued to play with them, they started to smooth out just right there in the 10 minutes I was playing with the knife. So and then there was another one where I squeezed it like I was gonna, you know, just testing the ergonomics of it, and I felt that little bit of slip, just like I did with one of these. And it went away just in like the 10 minutes of me playing with it. So that's just something, that's where I got that initial impression of talking about breaking in knives. This ZT, when I got this thing, it had perfect lockup and everything. It really had no issues at all. Excellent deployment, no slip, no stick, nothing. Really good action and really good lockup. Then after having this thing for about 3 or 4 days and flipping it a bunch, I started to get slip. Like when I squeezed the knife, I felt it slipping over, and I'm like, what's going on? And I'd turn it over and squeeze it, and this thing would slip. You can see, look, watch my fingers turn white here. I'm squeezing hard, and it will not slip, and no lock stick at all. But it started to get that. So what I did, I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And when I'd slip over, then they would stick like really bad to where it's like a pop, like a really loud pop when it released. And what I did is, instead of freaking out and calling ZT or, you know, what I did is I went ahead and just disassembled the knife. I cleaned it. I put it back together. No slip, no stick. It works perfectly. And the one thing I did notice is when I put it back together, I did get slightly off center. But honestly, it's nothing that bothers me at all. There's no rubbing, nothing like that. Perfectly fine. And I get no slip, no stick. When I disassemble this the next time, I might try and fix that centering. But it's really not bad. And I'm sure if I tightened up the pivot a little bit, it would probably center. But then it wouldn't be as free swinging. So that's why I left it where it was. I still get solid lockup and really nice action. But it's just not perfectly centered. But I'm not getting that lock stick or that slip, which is the more important thing to me, was that slip. I didn't like that. But yeah, so that went away really quick. So I know when I take this thing apart, some of that, which is barely even there anymore, I wanted to prove a point with this. That's why instead of taking it apart right away, I just flipped the hell out of it and just see if it worked itself out. And it did. And now you see I have about probably 30% lockup. So I know it's going to even move over a little more. And eventually I'll have really solid lockup with no lock stick. I'm pretty sure. I'll probably take this guy apart just because he is, you can see there, let's see if I can show you. Not really. You guys can't really see it. But it does have some schmuck coming out just from factory, just working in. When you're working through that factory, you know, through just working the knife in, you know, metal's grinding against metal. It all starts to, that's why you get that sludge in your, in like the oil. You'll see like it turns black. That's all the metal particles and stuff. You know, you have burrs and all kinds of stuff. And as the knife works in together, all that stuff starts to, you know, it's like metal shavings everywhere. And that's why you get that black shit in your oil. So yeah, another knife. When you guys saw this one, when I got this knife, it was pretty excessive lock stick on this pair of 3. And the action was really stiff. So you'll see, really very little lock stick to even speak of. I mean, you can barely hear that. I mean, it's nothing, guys. It's not lock stick. I mean, it's so subtle. Now this one did become free dropping just by pulling, like just by doing that. But I tightened it a little bit because it did start to get a slight bit of play in the blade. So tightened it a little bit and now it's not quite as free swinging. Although watch, if I put my finger here, it's free swinging. So that's what I also talk about, guys, where if you put pressure like that, it'll release the blade. If you're just because there is tension, when you pull this, the G10 is going to pull in. This is sometimes what we talk about with the tolerances of these. But yeah, really nice. And no lock stick. Just ever so slight little bit of lock stick. That was just from use, guys. I've not taken this knife apart. I haven't really done much. I maybe put a little bit of oil in the pivot. But other than that, it's just from use. This guy went ahead and wore in and the lock stick went away. This was another one where when I got it, it was a little stiff. It did not drop free. You can see now. This thing is beautiful action. And that was just from use, guys. And you will see, I put this thing to some solid use. And now we got a perfect action on this military. Really, really enjoyable to use. And perfect lockup. No play, any direction. Really solid lockup. Looking at about 40%. And just really beautifully done. So this is the importance of breaking knives in. And this is why I wanted to talk about this today, guys. Because I know a lot of guys, they freak out when they get that thing in the mail and it has lock stick and they're like, what, I got lock stick and I just got my knife. And it's, guys, let it break in, because your lock stick might go away, especially if it's subtle. If it's something like I had on the when I got Kurt's, god damn it, the Buck Marksman, that thing cut me because of that lock stick. That was kind of dangerous, especially because it's a lock you're not used to using, and that can be dangerous. And I did put pencil, I put graphite on it just to try and break it, and it did. It took care of it. So using pencil or Sharpie on the lock faces will help sometimes, or even doing a light sand sometimes on the lock face to rough it up a little can help. But I wouldn't suggest that, because some guys, including like Strider, might be like not, they might void the warranty. So with something like this, I know I could just send it to them and let them fix it. Although I will take the knife apart and see if just cleaning it helps. But yeah, just something I wanted to talk about. I'll go ahead and flip the camera around and conclude. So in conclusion, guys, what I really wanted to get across today is just giving your knife some time, using them and getting them in the field, and let them work themselves in. Let the lock faces work themselves together. You know, sharpen your knives and see if the steel behind that factory edge is any good. You know, sometimes that factory edge is just no good. It's been fatigued from the factory, and it just needs, you need to get rid of that steel, that fatigued steel. Whether it's burnt or fatigued, either way, it's just damaged apex, you know? So it's important to use your knives and sharpen your knives and flip your knives and just get all that factory grime out of there. So sometimes it's important to take your knife apart and clean it and put it back together. I think that was the big thing with the ZT. Once I cleaned it and got all that factory grime out of it, it performs amazingly. Lockup's perfect, no slip, no lock stick, excellent action. So that's really important, to let the knife wear in. With these, I feel like it's extremely important too, because you have a ceramic ball up against a hard steel, and they do have a pretty strong lock tension. Although I think these the contoured scale does have a slightly less aggressive lock bar pressure. Like, I think the inside cutout does have a little bit more tension on the lock bar, which may cause the knife to have a slightly less like drop shutty action. Although I've seen some of the ones with the inside lock cutout that still have just as smooth of an action. So I think it's just knife to knife, you know, and that's the other thing about production knives, guys. Everyone's not going to be perfect. Everyone's not going to be exactly the same. They should be similar, but they won't be exactly perfect. So just having that understanding and just making sure you give it the time. And then if it doesn't work itself out and it just continues to get worse or the same, then you can decide to go ahead and try and use the warranty. But I think it's important to give it some time and work it in. All right, and I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it was informative. I hope it's something that's relevant. Yeah, thanks a lot for watching. Have a great day, guys.